Let's receive him. Bishop, I think everybody's muted, so you're unmuted, so you're good to go. Welcome.
Well, greetings to you all, and it's a privilege to be able to just share a few moments with you. Bishop McCann called me this morning when I was en route to get my biscuit, so he interrupted my normal flow of things. So I'm a little agitated because I haven't had my biscuit. But I'm asking the Lord if He would speak to us and speak through us and help us to hear and say some things that will honor Him and invoke us all to faith and obedience. And if He would give us a privilege to understanding some things that He already knows about His world, His kingdom, His church, and about each of us individually. I want to talk about a concept called perspective. Perspective. I think it's a word that's a very pregnant word because it applies to every aspect of our life. And by definition, it's the picture that we paint of life. It's the meaning that we give to events, to circumstances and situations and people. It's how we describe things to our lives. And I think it's very important because all of us are living in an age of a lot of information. We're getting a lot of ideas and concepts. There's something called spiritual propaganda. We're getting a lot of statistics about things. And if you want to influence people, if you can ever get them into a state where they are either ignorant or uncertain or fearful about life, you can influence them with anything because they don't know the truth, they don't understand it, and they're fearful. And we're living in that kind of time because there's been an inconsistency in information. And that means that we need to have something in our lives that's consistent, something that's reliable, something that's dependable. And I do believe as Christians that comes through the work of the Holy Spirit and also the administration of the Word. So when I talk about perspective, I want to give a few ideas to you that has helped me navigate through some very unusual times. When I first came into the ministry, there was a verse of scripture that was very powerful. I'll be 80 in about a year or so, so you know I've been around quite a long time. And when I came along, there was a verse that said, if you have faith about the grain of a mustard seed, you will speak to this mountain, and this mountain will be cast into the sea. And I discovered something very quickly. There were some mountains that move, and there were some mountains that did move. In fact, there were some mountains that spoke back to you and said, I ain't going nowhere. I've been here longer than you have. And all of a sudden, I found that I had to learn how to deal with a word that I had to become accustomed to. That's called disappointment. In fact, the two most strongest emotions you will experience in your life, one is love, and the second is disappointment. Not a negative. It's just that when what we are expecting and anticipating doesn't happen. And for that reason, I needed to have something that was standardized myself. And so there's some sayings that I had to lock into my perspective. I've learned to anticipate things. I've learned to expect some things that would happen in life. I've learned some principles. Hope is victory over tomorrow. Hope is knowing the difference between a problem and an opportunity. I've learned that forgiveness is the healing of yesterday, regardless of what may have happened in your life. To forgive is to gain the victory. I've learned also that faith allows me to think divine thoughts. Faith allows me to look beyond the obvious. But I had to also learn that the quality of my faith is dependent upon what I have heard. Sometimes you don't have faith, you have presumption. And I learned that faith is not an emotional word. Faith does not work by emotion, does not work by feelings. I've learned that I serve God not because of what I feel, but because of what I know. And I've learned that revelation, I hope that you hear my words. Revelation is divine disclosure. That's when God reveals things to us about his perspective, his view, and his ideas. Uh, all of us have had the wrestle of the concept of impatience. Impatience. I'm a dentist by training, and I'm very disturbed with people who are habitually late. I did a teaching on that one time before because I just couldn't understand it. Uh, you can't leave home at the same time you expect to arrive at your destination. That's just an impossibility. If you plan to get to a place at 10, you can't leave at 10. You got to leave early. And I've had to manage people who were just habitually late. And so it really helped me. And what helped me was revelation. Hope you make note of this. Revelation is the solution to impatience. because what bothers you, what irritates you, when you get God's perspective over that, it really helps you. It helps you. I had to learn to deal with unwilling people. I had to learn to deal with unfaithful people, and that's a challenge. When you're dealing with people in your business and your work, your family, and things of that nature, when people don't measure up to your expectation, what do you deal with it? And so I had to learn that over these years that, as I said before, one word from God helped me to look at things totally differently. I've had to deal with all kind of people, all kind of situations, every kind of issue you can think about in life. I've had to deal with it, and I've had to address it in people's lives. And what has kept me is revelation from God. I would say to you that the most influential people that I'm looking at on the screen, your influence is not based upon your education, your training, your age, your experience, or who you know. It's based upon three things, and I hope that you remember this. One is your privilege to get answers to your prayers. I just did a teaching last night on prayer. And because when I go on Facebook, everybody's asking for somebody to pray. Get the prayer machines working. Get people to praying. And does it matter how many people that are praying with you or for you? And I want to give you a shocking revelation. It doesn't. Because you can have a crowd that's praying for you, but they don't believe the same way as you believe. And I've discovered that just because people are praying for your need, I think sometimes the most important thing we can do in prayer is not to pray for our need, but to pray that his kingdom will come, to give glory and thanksgiving to God. Because I dare say that when we pray according to his will, because he knows everything that we have need of. So people that can get answers to prayer, that's very important. And your prayer is not dependent upon the words that you speak, it's the words you hear. Prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue. Sometimes we talk about prayer, it's coming together and spending 2 hours talking, we get up and leave. That is not prayer. If you spend 20 minutes talking, you ought to spend at least 40 minutes listening. And so that's critical. But the second factor is those who can receive and communicate divine information. I hope that you, one thought, one idea from God can bring into a whole new dimension of life. One creative idea, God can settle strategy. I often say that one word from God settles all controversy. I can't tell you how many times one thought, one idea from God has brought me closer to my destiny. Sometime when I was lost, I didn't understand. There was no counsel, and just one thought from God, especially when I can get control of my emotions. You heard me say many times, emotions are like they're like children. They need to be disciplined. Wonderful friends, but terrible rulers. Can't be ruled by emotion. Can't be ruled by feelings. You be careful. It'll mislead you every time. But the fact we can receive and communicate divine information from God is a tremendous tool. And then thirdly, the most important, people who are willing to totally obey the Lord. And that's a crisis. Because to obey God means to go against our feelings, to go against our emotion. Sometimes to obey God is to go against what we want, what we desire. And I discovered that we are incentive-driven people. We obey God generally because of what he does for us. Even Satan said of Job, he doesn't serve you and obey you for no reason. He obeys you because you put a hedge around him. Jesus said people didn't follow him for the words he said. They followed him because of the loaves and the fish. But we have to learn to obey God when things are not going the way we think. And it's because of one fundamental conclusion: God means you well. I hope that you get that in your heart, children. God means you well. He's not a trickster. He doesn't test you. He does not put you through heartaches and sorrow to make you strong. That's not of God. God is the architect of your faith. He's not the engineer of your suffering. You need to understand that. So I've learned when I said that receiving and communicating divine information, perspective, the picture we paint of life. And what I'm about to share with you right now is the things that has kept me all of these years. As you know, my wife Sandra, we married over 51 years, departed this life in 2015, and I didn't know if I could live because I couldn't remember life without her. We were always together. We did everything together. She was my world, my life. And when you live that long with someone, you just can't even imagine how can life go on. But the Lord said something clearly to me. He said, "You'll be fine." When God makes an announcement, it's not with fanfare. He doesn't shout. He doesn't shake the rafters. He just makes a clear, soft tone. You'll be fine. In fact, he told me you'll write more books and you'll travel the nations and countries that you've never been to before. And then he told me, I've given you some things that are important. I've given you the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of revelation, strength, and a special work of grace. And so my strength, my idea to go on with life is dependent upon the fact that I've heard from God. And what I'm about to share with you right now is a simple thing. It's a simple thing because it's perspective. How you deal with disappointments when things don't work out the way you think they should. And that's generally experienced in areas of prayer. That's experienced in areas of guidance. When you're looking for something to happen, you're trying to go somewhere and you think you've heard from God and you found out that you might not have heard from God, because that's our biggest struggle, wrestling over the possibility that we're listening to our own mind, we're listening to our own words. And then, of course, the issue there comes about what do we do when the expectation, especially regarding people, when people disappoint you and let you down? People are not God. The only one that can make a promise and fulfill it is God. Trust me, children. The only thing people can promise you and fulfill is that they'll always be human. And I don't need to describe to you what that means. You know what that means. They'll come up short every time. They'll make a promise, they intend to do well, and they miss it every time. And so the things that I've learned about dealing with expectations and disappointments, anticipation, it came out of a little book, and you've heard me mention to you many times before, but I'm going to say it again because you need to make sure you get a copy of it. It's called Learn Optimism by Martin P. Seligman, Saligman. He's a psychologist out of University of Pennsylvania. And fundamentally, it's a treatise of the book of Philippians. Paul talks about this word's perspective. He gets upset with the Philippians because the Galatians, I'm sorry, because they've been bewitched. They've turned away from the truths. He's talking to the Philippians because Paul is in jail and people are preaching Christ, but they're not preaching it rightly. They're saying that in order to believe in Jesus, you must also practice the laws of Moses. And Paul is upset with this. And so Paul starts talking about how you look at life. And in this book, the writer uses the term explanatory style. How you explain things to yourself, regardless of the nature of them, either releases life or takes it away. And he says you have to explain things to yourself according to several parameters. Number one is the duration. And I've learned a principle. There are things, some things are permanent and some things are temporary. You cannot make temporary things permanent, and you shouldn't make permanent things temporary. There's some things in life that will be with you for a short period of time. Those of you that have children and those of you that have teenagers, oh, God help you. You know you need faith, you need grace, you need mercy, you need revelation, promise me, because it is something about those hormones and something about that frontal cortex that just doesn't seem to work until you get to be about my age, and it works well. That's why I have a saying, you have to live to be 50 before you get common sense. God help you all. But if you live to be 50, you get common sense. And so the writer says, when events happening in your life, you have to assess whether they're temporary or whether they're permanent. And I can say this to you, make note, trouble has a shelf life. It'll only be around for a short period of time. Don't make it permanent, I promise you. That's why suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So you must conclude whether it's permanent or whether it's temporary. The second is effect. Effect. You can't let something that affects one area of your life paralyze your whole life. One person leaves your life, you lose one job, one thing doesn't go right, and all of a sudden you're mad at the whole world. Bad perception. You have to keep things in the area of their influence. Something doesn't go well at school. I'll never forget my first year in dental school. Had one exam that the teacher tested, and he didn't train us on it. And we didn't do well. And all of a sudden we thought we'd never be a dentist. We'd never succeed. We'd never be successful. One setback, and we had paralyzed our whole life. Don't let something that affects one area of your life paralyze your whole life. Keep it in the area of its influence. Money is not the rule of everything. Money is not what we need, children. I promise you. What you need is the favor of God. One moment of favor is worth years of labor, if you understand what I'm saying. So hear me carefully, influence. And then, of course, source. Every time something happens in our life, we have to determine who's behind it. And anytime something happens bad, we think it's the devil. I hope that y'all have gotten beyond blaming the devil. He's not behind every rock. He's not behind every challenge. And if your car doesn't crank up when you wake, when you start in the morning, look under the hood and see if you put gas in it. It's probably not a demon. I came along at a time whenever there was a negative setback, it was a spirit. It was a devil. It was something going wrong. We spent most of our time rebuking the devil. And I've learned a principle. James taught me this. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee all of the time. And the way you resist him is by not talking to him. That's why my prayers are communion with God. I hope that when you pray, you don't talk to the devil. You're talking to God. Um, I don't spend my time talking to someone who's not going to tell the truth. I don't like to talk to liars. That's why I don't talk to a lot of Christians. Excuse me, Lord. But it's just a fact. So the critical thing is you understand the cause. Is it God? Is it you? Or is it the culture? There's some things that happen in life just because you are in the culture, just because of what you do. Philippians 1:22, I think it is, Paul says that as long as I'm in the ministry, there's some things that are unavoidable. As long as I'm in the ministry, he said, I'm going to have a Demas experience. I'll have a John Mark experience. I'll have a Hemi Kepha Barnabas experience. As long as you're in life, you're going to have people that may betray you, may leave you. As long as you're in life, if you're in the ministry, you're going to have people that make commitments, and they won't follow through with it. As long as you're in the ministry. That's why you have to make sure that you measure your life properly. You can't measure success by the presence of finances or good days, because we don't know how to determine a good day from a bad day. Because hear me carefully, there's something called the Joseph principle. That which I thought was evil, God has shown me it was really good. So when it comes to God, I can promise you this in. With God, there's always a way. Regardless what you may face, with God, there's always a way. But when it's demonic, it always breeds several things. Number one, disaster, defeat, frustration. It always reminds you what you didn't do, what you can't do, what you're not capable of doing. But with God, there's always a way. And when it's you, when it's you. I think it was one of the cartoon characters said he was blaming everybody, but he found out it was him. And I must admit, believe it or not, as many as you that may be perfect, as many of you that may be beyond reproach and believe that every word you say and everything you do is absolutely perfect, be in for a great awakening. There'll come times in your life when the problem is you, is you. It's either that you don't want to forgive or you can hold a grudge. Because as I said before, hope is victory over tomorrow. And forgiveness, hear me carefully, is victory over yesterday. I promise you, sometimes there are things in life you just have to walk away from it. I don't know if you found this out. There are some people in this world that are just unusual. They are exceptional people. There are people who will criticize you and condemn you. And make note of this: unjust criticism is first cousin of envy and jealousy. When people criticize you unjustly, that's because number one, they either want what you have, want to do what you want to do, but number one, they're not called, so they think they have to undermine you. So you have to learn in life not to take everything personal. There are a lot of things I just let go over my head, children. There's some things I act as if I just don't hear. There's a saying, and it's been around long, and y'all have been living, and it's I never found it in scripture. It said that I'll pass you like Christ passed Cicero. I never know Jesus passed Cicero. I never could figure that out. That was an old saying of country people. What it means is that I will act as if you don't exist. So if you value the opinions of people beyond the opinions of God, hear me carefully, you'll be depressed. So that explanatory style, explaining things to yourself properly, put things in the right place. Don't make permanent things temporary. You know what they are. You know the things that are temporary. You know the things that are permanent. You know that trouble won't last always. In fact, even good days don't last always. Put things in their proper place. Then naturally, you must influence. Don't let something that bothers one area of your life shut down your whole life. One person leaves your life, that doesn't shut it down. I have people that refuse to trust again because they were married to a fool. You know what a fool is, don't you? Did I describe that? That's a person that no longer hears from God. That's a person who thinks that their intelligence is all within their own mind. And if that happens in life, you need to understand life. How can I say this? Love is an investment. It's an investment in people, but the dividends are not always guaranteed. Sometimes you don't get back what you invest. So you have to learn to get past life. So no more than something that affects one area of your world influence your whole world. And then, of course, lastly, is of course the source. The source. Um, by now, you know when God's involved. Yeah, you know. There's an energy when God's involved. There's a hope. There's a life that comes. And you know when the wicked one is involved. You don't have to tell me. I can be in a meeting. I can tell you when it starts to speak. Just sort of sucks the air out of the room, takes away life, takes away energy, always remind you of the impossibility. But with God, there's always a way. So perspective, this is my perspective of life. This is how I live. This is how I get through. This is how I forgive bishops that call me in the morning on Sunday morning when I'm en route to get my biscuits and interrupt me and ask me, and then call me back later when I'm driving back home and tell me that they told me that number one, the meeting is not 10 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock. And how do you know the only thing I can do to such a thing as that is just forgive? I forgive you, sir, today, but you owe me. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
IT.
enjoy, enjoy your tea. I owe you. I owe you.
That's good stuff.
I owe you.